In the early 1970s, an exceptionally brilliant American psychologist named David Rosenhan engineered one of the most chilling, controversial experiments in the entire history of clinical science. Rosenhan recruited 8 completely sane, ordinary citizens, including a graduate student, 3 psychologists, a pediatrician, and a painter, and instructed them to attempt to gain admission into various psychiatric hospitals across the United States. Their instructions inside their computer workspaces were simple. They were to book an ordinary appointment, claim they were hearing a faint, unfamiliar voice whispering the words empty, hollow, and thud. And the exact second they were admitted to the ward, they were to instantly stop faking the symptom and act completely normal. Every single one of the 8 volunteers was immediately diagnosed with a severe mental illness and locked behind closed asylum doors. But the true terror of the case study occurred after they were inside. Despite behaving with absolute sanity, interacting politely with staff, and writing normal observations in their journals, not a single doctor, nurse, or institutional authority realized they were sane. They were trapped inside a diagnosis, exposing a profound law of human consciousness. Once the human mind attaches a label to a person, it becomes completely blind to objective reality, distorting every single future action simply to validate its original assumption. This profound institutional hijack is driven by a psychological mechanism known as label-induced confirmation gating, operating through a structure called the systemic diagnostic trap. In clinical cognitive psychology, your brain is an aggressive, pattern-seeking machine that uses top-down predictive processing to minimize cognitive energy expenditure. When an authority figure or an established institution assigns a definitive category or label to an environment, the surrounding crowd's prefrontal cortex goes completely offline. Their subconscious treats the label as an absolute, unyielding truth of the world. They stop evaluating the actual physical behavior standing right in front of them. Instead, their predictive processing engine runs a hyper-vigilant scan strictly to find minor anomalies that validate the original label. The system does not decide to alter data logically. The institutional mind simply executes an automated defensive maneuver to preserve its internal schema, transforming an ordinary, sane human action into a symptom of madness simply to ensure its internal simulation loop never breaks. To understand why this systemic diagnostic trap holds such an ironclad, unyielding grip over human awareness, we must look at the neurobiology of categorization and the semantic gating networks. When modern neuroscientists place individuals inside brain scanners and expose them to objects or people that have been pre-labeled with a specific emotional valence, they witness an extraordinary neural shortcut. The moment the labeled stimulus is perceived, a rapid wave of high activity lights up the left inferior prefrontal gyrus and the semantic memory networks, the regions responsible for forcing raw sensory data to match pre-existing text definitions. Simultaneously, your brain reduces activity in the ventral attention networks which process new, unfiltered environmental data. In a very literal sense, your biology pulls the plug on objective tracking. Your brain sends massive neural energy down to rewrite your perception before you ever achieve conscious awareness, forcing your nervous system to remain on a permanent, defensive autopilot, where neutral signals are automatically distorted to fit the crowd's expectations. When this intense neurochemical confirmation gating encounters a person who completely violates the assigned label, the subconscious mind of the observer deploys an automated defensive maneuver known as case structure assimilation. This is an aggressive psychological shield where the ego actively weaponizes its intellect to rewrite history, rather than admitting its initial categorization was completely wrong. The human mind cannot tolerate the internal instability of recognizing that its authority or logic has failed. To protect your pride from the terrifying vulnerability of being exposed as incorrect, your brain performs a catastrophic distortion of reality. Inside the Rosenhan hospitals, when the sane volunteers took ordinary notes in their diaries, the nursing staff wrote official reports stating, "Patient engages in compulsive writing behavior, a clear symptom of their underlying paranoia." Notice how the mind uses your objective actions as an emotional shield to validate its own delusion, leaving its defense shields totally raised, while it converts your sanity into an illness simply to keep its internal schemas safely protected. The primary weapon a rigid institution or a manipulative individual uses to reinforce this mental prison is a process called contextual frame gating. During the experiment, the volunteers were kept locked inside the wards for an average of 19 days, with one participant held for 52 days, despite displaying flawless social cooperation. The doctors never audited the raw data of their daily interactions. They viewed every single breath through the context of the hospital walls. In clinical psychology, context is the ultimate filter. If you place a completely healthy individual inside an environment designed for sickness, your brain automatically attributes every quirk, every bad mood, and every boundary to their pathology. The clash between your private need for moral righteousness and the fluid reality of human nature creates severe cognitive dissonance inside the observer's brain. To resolve this internal agony, their mind creates an escape hatch. It convinces them that their ongoing containment of your freedom is an act of superior medical caution and protection, choosing the cruelty of a structural imprisonment today over the vulnerability of open learning tomorrow. Alongside contextual frame gating, the pre-labeled mind utilizes a secondary highly passive filter known as diagnostic degradation. Once an institution or a dominant partner has successfully stamped a negative label onto your character inside your workspace or home, your individual sovereignty is completely erased from their database. They stop viewing you as a complex human being with sacred boundaries and start treating you as an abstract compilation of symptoms. This filter alters their perception because it makes their continuous disrespect look like an act of professional clinical detachment. Their selective attention filter ensures that their brain actively highlights your moments of frustration or defensive outbursts, while completely deleting or ignoring your patience, your intellect, and your competence. Diagnostic degradation transforms the relational landscape into a blank space where your voice carries zero moral weight. It allows the manipulator to participate in systemic emotional erasure under the absolute guise of high objectivity, completely shielding their ego from self-reflection while forcing your identity into total compliance. These abstract biological filters manifest daily in devastating real-world loops, the most common of which is the trap of the corporate performance box. This is the precise reason why a highly talented, innovative professional can build massive technical excellence inside their computer workspace, yet remain entirely trapped at the bottom of an institutional hierarchy for years because of a single early mistake. If an operator enters a firm and makes a localized technical error during their initial week, the surrounding management instantly deploys label-induced confirmation gating, branding the worker as unreliable or low capacity. From that exact second, the worker's timeline is compromised. When they deliver a flawless, high-performing asset months later, the leadership's confirmation bias filters actively block out the data, categorizing the success as luck or an accident. The organization voluntarily surrenders its collective intelligence, sliding down a slope of systemic stagnation simply because its members choose to preserve the comfortable delusion of their first impression over the raw truth of their eyes. We see this exact same self-sabotage playing out in our personal lives through the destructive pattern of the relational smear pathologization. When an intimacy-avoidant or narcissistic partner senses that you are beginning to enforce hard personal boundaries and refuse to accept their mixed signals. Their predictive tracking engine executes a swift, defensive maneuver to protect their position in the social circle. They do not address your data. They begin pathologizing your character to your friends and family. They whisper behind closed doors. I am so worried. They're acting completely unstable, dramatic, and emotionally insecure lately. By stamping you with a clinical label of instability, they construct an absolute optical illusion across the entire social circle. The next time you lose your composure out of sheer exhaustion and launch a loud public confrontation, the crowd looks at the eruption, matches it with the prefabricated label, and initiates immediate social exclusion. Your brain registers this social exclusion as an immediate survival threat, forcing you back into a loop of compliance, sacrificing your dignity today just to secure safety tomorrow. When this collective confirmation gating and label pathologization scales up across an entire culture, it produces the highly unique phenomenon of mass hysteria and ideological pathocracy. A society enters a profound crisis of decay when its primary institutions stop evaluating citizens, scientific data, and civic policies based on objective human consequence, logic, or metrics. Instead, they begin navigating existence solely through the filtered lens of absolute ideological labels and tribal categorization. Independent critical thought is treated as a literal social crime against the collective moral simulation of the herd. Mass labeling turns a population into a synchronized, unthinking herd that will gladly burn down its own structural legal protections and destroy its most objective mind simply to protect the collective ego from the terrifying vulnerability of self-reflection. A civilization does not slide into madness because it is overrun by external monsters. It slides into total tyranny because its citizens choose compliance with a comfortable shared slogan over the discomfort of an objective truth. The true danger of the systemic diagnostic trap is that it constructs a perfectly closed, self-fulfilling cognitive loop that entirely blinds you to your own loss of personal sovereignty. The cycle begins the moment you accept a negative label from a dominant environment and allow your body to experience the automated, physical wave of identity anxiety. This high-stress environment creates immediate subconscious pressure to align with their authority, forcing your brain to reduce activity in its regulatory and logical processing networks. Because your internal boundaries are lowered by the fear of exclusion, you choose compliance with their script, adopting an introjected guilt loop, or overanalyzing your own healthy boundaries inside your workspace. To clear the immediate wave of exhaustion, your mind instantly deploys case structure validation, rewriting history to convince your conscious ego that the label must be right. This failure to stand for your own independent truth is then used by your predictive processing engine as a new baseline, permanently locking you in a loop of trauma dependency. Dismantling this matrix of institutional labeling requires a rare, aggressive practice known as radical identity sovereignty. You cannot melt a diagnostic trap by arguing against the label, offering more compliance, or trying to prove your sanity to a compromised crowd. Your brain's predictive processing engine demands hard, unyielding data points of absolute emotional detachment to break the circuit. This reprogramming begins by learning an extraordinary truth uncovered in behavioral psychology. An institution's label is a description of their own rigid schemas, not a reflection of your objective worth. The next time a toxic presence triggers your anxiety by pathologizing your character or distorting your data, do not look to their feedback for validation. Recognize that your intense desire to scream your innocence is your amygdala firing an early exclusion alarm. Force your conscious mind to execute an absolute stop. Match their labels with an absolute icy wall of professional neutrality, anchoring your awareness strictly to verifiable, written facts on your desktop workspace, forcing them to face their own projections. Shattering your internal categorization filters and choosing to occupy your own psychological space is an act of supreme heroism, because it forces you to face the raw neural pain of standing completely exposed outside your fortress of certainty. Your brain will fight this process at every single turn, desperately screaming at you to drop your guard, mirror the herd, and accept the comfortable shared illusions of your invisibility simply to keep your ego safe in the pack. But now that you know the anatomy of the trap, now that you understand how your subconscious mind uses label-induced confirmation gating, contextual framing, and diagnostic degradation to turn you into an unthinking echo, the labels have lost their lock over your consciousness. You can choose to step out of the illusion and view your reality with absolute unyielding clarity. This navigation of your subconscious architecture is a lifelong education, and your brain utilizes dozens of other invisible neural mechanisms every single day to dictate your choices and trap you on autopilot without your consent. If you are ready to shatter the rest of these hidden mental loops, discover how your mind fakes reality, and unlock the true mechanisms of your subconscious, click on the playlist appearing on your screen right now. We have built an entire archive of long-form case studies and psychological deep dives designed explicitly to help you look past the self-delusions of your ego. Click through, explore the library, and take absolute control of your psychology.